And we turn now to the other big story, the latest from the Middle East. Protests continued in Yemen today, where shots were fired as protesters turned out for the ninth straight day. There were also demonstrations in Oman, Kuwait, Algeria, and Djibouti. The most serious trouble has apparently been in Benghazi, Libya, where the government of Mommar Gadhafi opened fire on protesters. At least 90 were killed in Libya Saturday, bringing the death toll to at least 173 there. In Bahrain, across the Persian Gulf from Iran and where the U.S. Sixth Fleet is headquartered, it's been calm since the government pulled back its forces. Our Alan Pizzey is there. Alan, what is the latest?
Bob, Pearl Square is now packed with people. They've got banners and signs and Bahraini flags everywhere, a lot of loudspeakers, people up on the stage. Basically, this situation here in Bahrain has turned from street confrontation to political haggling. The Crown Prince and representing the government has said, look, we'll talk to everybody. We just want peace. We just want to heal all the wounds and get on with things. The opposition says they'll talk, but talks are not going on right now. People aren't sitting face to face across the table because the opposition's problem is that they've got to decide what can they negotiate away on behalf of people who are out there facing tear gas and bullets and are still actually quite angry.
All right, well, at least it sounds like things are a little better than they were a couple of days ago there. The worst situation now today in Libya, I take it?
Indeed, Libya looks like the worst, and it looks like it's going to get even worse than it is now. Independent reporting, of course, is almost impossible from there. They don't allow journalists in, but again, you can't shut down the social networking, and people are getting information out. There's been horrific video of the police and military opening up on protesters. It started in Benghazi in the east. That's always been a place of dissent. It's always been kept down in poverty because the people there are not really Gaddafi backers. And we're now hearing reports it spread towards Tobruk. And there were some reports, too, that some members of the military and security forces in Benghazi said, no, we're not going to do this. And they brought in outside mercenaries and using fairly heavy weaponry. So it's pretty brutal. Gaddafi is as brutal and ruthless as he is flamboyant, Bob. And he's not going to, I'm sure, step back as easily as the Bahrainis did, or Hosni Mubarak, for example. He's in charge, and he's got nowhere to go but probably the gallows if this thing goes wrong. So I think we're going to see a lot of bloodshed there, except we're not going to see it all because we can't get there.
All right, Alan Pizzey, who's been covering that part of the world for a long, long time. Alan, thank you so much. And with me here in the studio now is David Sanger, the chief Washington correspondent for the New York Times, who's been covering that part of the world and writing about it for a long, long time, too. Maybe not as long as Alan. David, he made an interesting point, Alan did here, that Gaddafi probably goes to the gallows if he doesn't survive this. He's been there longer than Mubarak, I guess, hasn't he? Or
he has. He's been there more than 40 years. We're approaching, sort of Castro records with Mr. Gaddafi, Colonel Gaddafi. There are sort of two categories here, Bob, of countries that are facing this. There are American adversaries where Washington is perfectly happy to sort of stand back and watch this unfold. Iran, Syria, and Gaddafi's Libya, even though he has made some motions toward the West. And then there are a lot of close American friends. Bahrain, and you saw the president on the phone with the king on Friday night, and his national security aide, Tom Donilon, talking to the Crown Prince yesterday. And that was all about trying to get them to make the changes that President Mubarak never made. Now, these are not welcome phone calls in these countries, but Bahrain is a place of huge interest. It's not only where the Fifth Fleet is, it's also where the whole U.S. effort to contain Iran is centered from. I mean, that is how the U.S. Patrols the Gulf.
I guess what they're trying to work out there and what the demonstrators are calling for, do they want the king to leave, or are they pushing for some sort of constitutional monarchy as we have in Great Britain, for example?
Well, if you listen to the cheers from the roundabout, a lot of them have been for the king to leave. But this is a different dynamic than in Egypt. Egypt was a fairly unitary society, had a lot of grievances particularly against President Mubarak. In Bahrain's case, there is the Shia majority that is ruled by a Sunni minority. And so the army has a very different calculation here. They know that if the king leaves, the Shia take over, this army is out. And so that's why you saw, I think, this incredible outpouring of violence which only got called off by the king. Now, whether they turn this on and turn it off periodically, that could undercut the way they do the negotiations.
If the king was out, and what would happen? What would happen to U.S. interests there? Would the Fifth Fleet have to leave? Would they be ordered out?
Well, it's hard to know how this would work out, and of course the Fifth Fleet's an enormous employer there. The biggest concern there right now is their next door neighbor, Saudi Arabia. So far you have not seen this happen in Saudi Arabia. Remember, it's the Saudis who called in to President Obama during the Egyptian crisis and said, let President Mubarak do whatever he needs to do, including shooting people on the streets, because losing the region would be just too difficult. In Bahrain, they've got even stronger interests because it's right across the causeway, and you have to think that their advice to the Bahraini king is the same. So the Saudis right now are very unhappy with Washington because they believe that President Obama has just let this go on. President Obama says, it's not my fight.
We really have no particular interest of note in Libya, though, with Gaddafi. I guess the good news is that Gaddafi was building a nuclear weapon, and he turned over all his nuclear technology.
That's right. He was trying. He didn't get very far, and he turned it over in 2003, right after the American invasion of Iraq. And at the same time, he tried to settle the Pan Am 103 issue, which was, of course, believed to be Libyan-led. But that said, there's no love lost between Washington and Colonel Gaddafi. And if he didn't survive this, I don't think you would see a lot of mourning going on in the State Department of the White House.
About 20 seconds left. Do you see these demonstrations across the region continuing, David?
Bob, the CIA missed this a month ago when they thought that Tunisia wouldn't spread to Egypt. I think now all of the common wisdom is the reverse, that this could keep on going, and we don't know where it stops. The problem for the United States right now is there isn't very much leverage on this. Not having encouraged a whole lot of reform before, it's a little bit too late to bring about reform in many of these countries today.
All right. David Sanger, The New York Times. Thanks so much, David.